All right, class. I just want to talk about Edna St. Vincent Millay very quickly. One thing, that she wrote, and I want to get this out front, is Elizabethan sonnets. Just so you know, those are 14-line poems, usually divided into a stanza of 4 lines, followed by another stanza of 4 lines, followed by a third stanza of 4 lines, and a final 2-line couplet, meaning the 2 lines rhyme. The rhyme scheme is usually ABA, CDC, EF, GG, and it's usually written in iambic pentameter, meaning, of course, um, 5 meter, 10 syllables, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Generally, also you may not know this about sonnets, but they're all kind of building towards one point. But a really good sonnet will sometimes have what you call a thesis or a setup, where it kind of proposes a circumstance or an idea. And then the next, 6 or 8 or 4 lines will be the antithesis, where it argues against that idea. And then you usually have, right before the final 2 line couplet, you have what's called the volta, or the jumping off point. And that's usually where the poem changes, and then you have the final point of the poem. Now, you don't always have these components. Sometimes it just builds up to the volta and goes on one idea, but I wanted to let you know that as well. And sometimes you have also what's called a sonnet sequence. You'll have sonnets in a number, and they have all kinds of traditional things that happen at different points in a sonnet sequence. Like sometimes in the early in number 1 or 2, the narrator sees a lover from afar, begins to fall in love with him. Then for 4 or 5 sonnets in the sequence, pines from far away, then gets a friend to talk to him, and then at some point there's that person loves somebody else, and it's all why sad, and then and then it may or may not all come together in the end. But there's like certain things that happen along the way. So she writes a lot of sonnets. I don't know how many we'll be looking at, but just so you're aware of that. Okay, again, a little bit about her. She became kind of the national symbol of the American woman in the 1920s. Um, she was raised by a divorced mother who was a nurse, and so she learned very quickly that education was a good thing, and to be confident and self supporting. She went to Vassar College. A benefactor was impressed by her writing, kind of helped her out financially a little bit, as oftentimes this happened with writers up until modern days. um, she was a member. So after Vassar, she went to New York City and was in Greenwich Village with. We were talking about Eugene O'Neill's plays earlier. Well, she was part of the Provincetown Players with Eugene O'Neill, and that was run by a married couple. Susan Glaspell was the wife in that married couple, with her husband. I think his name was Cook, but Susan Glaspell is the one who wrote Trifles, which was a super famous feminist um, literature play, based on something that actually happened, a murder, in fact. Anyways, um, so she got married to a businessman, and up in the later part of her life in a farm in upstate New York. So her poetry kind of changes over time when and this is from the Norton. This quote will kind of help you understand. Although as a young woman, Millay achieved a certain degree of notoriety for love poetry that described free, guiltless sexuality, her poetic range was extremely varied. The tone of her earliest work was flippantly cynical. Her later work became more muted and lyrical, as you see with like this, Recuerdo is very lyrical. Or when we look at Recuerdo, you'll see it's very lyrical. Um, Her New England poems, that's the later stuff in her life, are all about nature and the familiar, and they fit into kind of a regional tradition. Her closed stanza forms and regular metrical lines, through them, she displayed a high degree of technical virtuosity within, deliberately chosen line limits. So that's that formalism, Um, one of her quotes is, "I will put chaos into 14 lines," referring to sonnets. So in that way, she was very traditionalist in those forms. and we'll look at recuerdo. As you can see with its rhyme scheme, it's a very lyrical poem. Recuerdo means like a little moment or remembrance, souvenir in time. Um, it's very straightforward. Couple of lovers out having a good time. That's all there is to it. Apostrophe to man. I wanted to look at this one because you can see, like after World War I, people are dreading its return, the fact that it's coming again, and you can see that kind of that tone of what Norton described as flippantly cynical here. The way she's talking about, detestable race, expunge yourself, die out, talking about humanity. And you can see just all the blatant criticisms, uh, you know, and this is all pretty straightforward. I mean, there's nothing in this that is, uh, hidden meaning or anything. It's very well out there. You can see the fear after, you got to realize after World War I, America returned to isolationism, only worrying about ourselves. And then all this stuff was building up in Europe. Everybody could see it coming. It was coming, kind of like the rise again of kind of Nazism in America, fascism in America. We can see it coming, and nobody did anything. And this is kind of her, her response to that. Here's a nice sonnet for you. I too, beneath your moon, almighty sex. I chose this one, and these notes here are pretty good, I think, from Los Angeles College. Um, the idea, this is about her sexuality. She felt women should be able to have open sexuality. And, so the notes are pretty straightforward. We also have I Forgot a Moment. And she's being critical here of how America kind of forgot about Europe, this isolationism again that kind of allowed World War II to blossom and happen. So I picked these poems because I felt like they were all around kind of represented her the best. You get a sonnet, you get some love poems, some early sexual poems, uh, you get some political stuff, pretty good representation.